Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the transfer tips for Blank Gameweek 29, and there are even more videos headed your way, like the best free hit team, the wildcard squad, my own team selection, and another deadline stream. The same goes for UCL Fantasy, with a wildcard team there, my own team selection, and another deadline stream, this time on the Tuesday. What you see on screen are the most transferred in players at this point of the game week. Unsurprisingly, Chris Wood is top. He is the standout replacement for the likes of Jean-Philippe Mateta and Matheus Cunha, which I'll highlight in this video, but I'll also discuss other players you can buy in that position with lower ownership if you really want to chase rank and rise up those mini leagues and the rankings. Smash the like button of this video and subscribe to the channel. Our aim is to get this to over 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like very few subscribers. Check all the other links in the description below for my X, Instagram and Blue Sky. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in that description. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. He might be a very template pick and some would argue he's very boring and safe, but Chris Wood is the best forward in the game from now until the end of the season, alongside the likes of Isak and Erling Haaland. But in the case of the latter, it is very difficult to get to that sort of striker without selling some really big assets in the midfield and forward line. That could include Cole Palmer, who has been out of form, and that could work very well for some people, but I certainly wouldn't entertain selling Palmer and Isak simultaneously, or selling Salah, albeit for the short term. I know some people are considering the wildcard in Gameweek 31 or 32, so a very cheap option who offers tremendous value is Chris Wood, who faces Ipswich Town away in Blank Gameweek 29, and even the next few fixtures are quite appealing, facing Man United at home, Aston Villa away, Everton at home, and Tottenham Hotspur on their travels. And I think Chris Wood, beyond that, would have excellent fixtures to round off the season. He has 18 goals and 3 assists in this campaign with 37 bonus points and 172 FPL points overall. He is the highest scoring forward in the game. Let's see if Isak can at least overtake him for one game week only on Monday night. But if you want to go a bit more differential, then my advice would be Evanilson. You've also got Visser, who's got poor fixtures, but he can get bonus points, and his stats are identical to Chris Wood, as mentioned in my recent deadline stream. You've also got Strand Larsen from a fixtures perspective, but I'm not too keen on him, especially without Matheus Cunha, who provides that creativity and another option for Wolves in that attack. So I think Chris Wood is just a safe option, and you look at the other choices who feature in Blank Gameweek 29, and to be quite honest with you, there aren't many options. Erling Haaland will be the standout. Marmoush could be a nice differential punt for the next couple of game weeks, and you've got Evanilson with low ownership. He scored in recent games against Wolves in the FA Cup and against Tottenham Hotspur in that 2-2 draw. Nico Williams was so close to getting bonus points against Man City, and not so long ago, he got maximum bonus against Arsenal to deliver 9 points overall. And for that price point, you are entering one of the best defences in the Premier League, and Nottingham Forest have kept more clean sheets than any other team. They've got the fixtures, and I think it's a great time to buy the likes of Nico Williams. If you've got the budget though, I think the likes of Aina and Milenkovic might be more secure options in the long term, because with Nico Williams, he is still the least secure, at least compared to the other two. And I do think Milenkovic poses the most attacking threat. He has 6 big chances this season and an XG figure of over 3, which is tremendous for a centre-back. Whilst with Nico Williams, you won't get many goals or assists, and with the bonus points, they won't come too often, and really you're just hoping for 6 pointers through those clean sheets. He has 25 shots this season and 83 FPL points, and since becoming an established starter, he has not looked back, and he's been one of the best fullbacks in the Premier League in this campaign. The stats in general aren't going to be too tremendous here. Only 4 big chances, 2 big chance created, and 8 key passes. But with Nico Williams, you've got a very nice entry point into one of the best defences in the Premier League. I'm well aware that this is stating the obvious, but Mohamed Salah is clearly a hold, even though he's so expensive, and most people will bench him this week or free hit and just have Salah back for Gameweek 30. But I'm seeing a lot of people discussing the possibility of selling him and possibly going without him in Gameweeks 30 and 31 before wildcarding around Gameweek 32. Now, that could still work out in the short term, but it's a massive risk. His ownership still remains very high, but it has gone down by 1% since I created these graphics over the weekend, and a lot of people are looking to sell him, at least in the short term, and then bring him back fairly shortly afterwards. But even going without him for 1 week could prove very costly. He didn't have a great game against Southampton, but scored 2 penalties, and he's been so consistent all season. Those that went for Palmer as their captain found out the hard way with a 15-point swing or 14-point swing going in Salah's favour. He has 27 goals, 17 fantasy assists, 96 shots inside the box, and 306 FPL points. That is a new record in this game. He has a massive advantage as a forward compared to the likes of Suarez, Haaland and Thierry Henry in the past, but it is still a phenomenal season. It might even end up being the very best in Premier League history, and every single stat is incredible. 36 big chances, 21 big chance created, 69 key passes, an XG figure of 21.32 and 106 shots overall. Mohamed Salah is definitely worth holding on to, and even if you're looking to go about him for 1 week in Game Week 30, I don't think that's advisable. I'd only look to sell him if you don't have much value tied up in him and you can easily bring him back for Game Week 30, and if you're only going about him for Blank Gameweek 29. There's no denying that Cole Palmer is in terrible form right now. That's 9 matches without a goal across all competitions. He missed a penalty against Leicester City. He was denied by Hermansen, the Leicester goalkeeper, and he also missed 2 big chances against Southampton, producing an XG figure of 1.07 on that particular occasion. His stats are still decent across the board, but he does pale in comparison to last season where he took the Premier League by storm. 14 goals, 8 fantasy assists, 20 big chance created, and 181 FPL points. But look at the difference in terms of him and Salah now. It's absolutely mind-blowing. No one expected this going into this campaign, and it was fairly close for the first 10 to 15 game weeks of the season, but now there is no contest, and Palmer is expendable. I certainly get it, and I think if you can sell him and go to Erling Haaland for free, that could be a very good move, especially over the coming weeks. But I don't think it's worth a -4 hit in a lot of scenarios, and it also depends on who you're selling up front. If it's Matheus Cunha or Jean-Philippe Mateta, I think that works very well. But if it's Alexander Isak, who does blank in 29, but you'd want him for double Game Week 32, and Newcastle have excellent fixtures in the long term, I just don't like a pairing of Haaland and Nwaneri compared to Palmer and Alexander Isak. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of recommending holding Palmer in most scenarios, but I completely get the temptation to sell him after the recent blanks and some really huge misses in the last couple of games. During Saturday's deadline stream, we got the leaked news of Marmoush being on the bench, which was quite surprising, but ultimately with Man City, apart from Erling Haaland, everybody else is benchable, and we could see this being a factor in many of the game weeks coming up. But I think Marmoush will start in Game Week 29 and 30, 2 appealing home games against Brighton and Leicester, but the Seagulls have been in great form with 6 consecutive wins across all competitions, so that could be tougher than it usually would be for Manchester City, who have 15 losses in the last 30 matches, which is simply incredible. Their downfall has been unexpected, to say the least, and Marmoush has blanked in 5 out of 6 matches in this season, but during his time at Frankfurt, he was producing some mind-boggling numbers, only behind the likes of Salah across Europe in terms of goals and assists combined. He has 3 goals in the Premier League this season, that first half hat-trick against Newcastle, no assists, 12 shots, and 26 FPL points. For a lot of people, that will be the entry point into that Man City attack. I would argue for the next couple of weeks, Foden might be more appealing. He has a great record against Brighton, and in fixtures like Leicester at home, I could see Foden having a really big haul. But Marmoush is still a very good FPL asset, and for those that have him, I'd highly recommend keeping him. But in terms of recommending forwards to replace Mateta, Cunha, or other issues in your forward line, I think Marmoush has dropped down a little bit in the pecking order, but I wouldn't expect him to be benched against Brighton at home. Cody Gakpo has struggled with injuries recently, and that's 9 points since double Game Week 24 when I sold him, so it seems like I got off at the exact right time, and it has been quite frustrating for those that have held on to the Dutchman, and I've said this for several weeks now. You had that Southampton game coming up in 28, and as you get closer to that time frame, you'd become tempted to keep Gakpo and then reassess the situation or just sell him in 29. But I've been very persistent in the last couple of weeks to just sell Gakpo, and in the case that you held him in 28, I thought he was worth starting in most scenarios, and luckily he didn't play a single minute. He wasn't even on the bench, so it wasn't a case of him being on the bench and having a brief cameo as a substitute, delivering 1 point and blocking somebody else's points on your bench. But I think Gakpo is quite clearly a sell. He is still yellow flagged, and the issue isn't long term, so we could see him back in the fold by Game Week 30 in time for that Merseyside derby, and Gakpo can do very well in some of those fixtures like West Ham at home in Game Week 32 and Leicester away in Game Week 33. But I think Gakpo is worth selling at this moment in time, and as I said before, Chris Wood, Ivanosen, Marmoush will be some of the best options who feature in Blank Gameweek 29 to replace him once Mateta is back from injury by the end of the month, and I have covered his injury in recent podcasts and the latest updates by Oliver Glasner. He would definitely be another option that's even better than Cody Gakpo, and not to mention Alexander Isak, who is by far the best forward for Double Game Week 32, and from now until the end of the season, I think Isak and Chris Wood are the absolute standouts. Another player I've discussed in quite a lot of detail in recent videos is Lewis Hall, who is out for the rest of the season, so that's a very simple one of course. He is currently the most transferred out player, and it makes complete sense. His ownership is still quite high, but it has dropped massively to what it was a couple of weeks ago. And I think what is really important in terms of highlighting Lewis Hall is the best replacements for him. I think Kerkez and Howson are some of the best options, who are also cheaper than Lewis Hall, at least in the case of Howson, and Kerkez is similarly priced. You've also got Gabriel if you are able to afford a premium defender, and from Game Week 30 and beyond, I still think Trent is one of the best defenders in the game, and Daniel Munoz will be very appealing. He's got low ownership, has Southampton away in Game Week 30 and a double in Game Week 32. So those options will be my favourites to replace Lewis Hall, and I think a very simple transfer will be Aït-Nouri for the next couple of matches, with Wolves being top of the FDR until Game Week 34. But I'm not fully convinced about Wolves, and even against Southampton away, I think Wolves could concede in that game. But Aït-Nouri, from a fixtures perspective, isn't too shabby. That'll be another option to consider in terms of replacing Lewis Hall. But my favourites by far would be Munoz, Gabriel, Trent, and one of Howson or Kerkez. Morgan Rogers has been a massive FPL troll recently with disallowed goals in back-to-back game weeks. He did score against Crystal Palace, to be fair, in Game Week 27, but in the Champions League, he got an assist, won player of the match, and delivered 9 points in UCL Fantasy. He just hasn't been able to replicate that in FPL recently, and with the blank in 29 and some pretty mediocre fixtures until Game Week 33, and even beyond that, I think Rogers is sellable. The only fixture that stands out over the next 5 would be Southampton away in Game Week 32, and he still has 8 yellow cards, 2 more before Aston Villa have played the 32nd league game, and Rogers will serve a 2-game suspension. That's 7 goals, 5 assists for the season, 113 FPL points, and his ownership has dipped quite dramatically. It was around 26% a couple of weeks ago, and it's now under 20, and we could see this plummet even further. But in terms of the best replacements for Morgan Rogers, I think Nwaneri as an 8th attacker could be ideal, and he's significantly cheaper, which also helps. You've also got a few others at a similar price tag, mainly Kluivert, who for me would be my favourite 6.1 million and under midfielder. I think Matoma is decent, but I don't think it's the right time to invest in him right now. And you've also got a second Bournemouth midfielder perhaps, although I'd rather go for Evanilson as one of the forwards and double up on Bournemouth offensively in that sort of way. You don't have many options who feature in Blank Gameweek 29 at this sort of price range, but even Nwaneri would be a nice long-term option to replace Rogers, give you more funds in the bank, and make other upgrades, which might even include Erling Haaland up front. Over the last 3 game weeks, João Pedro has produced 29 points with a lot of bonus along the way, and in some of these fixtures coming up, he delivered big time in the reverse fixtures, like Man City, for example. He came off the bench, scored and assisted, and got 11 points in a 25-minute span, and he produced 2 assists against Aston Villa and getting bonus points as well. He has 8 goals and 6 assists for the season, 23 bonus, and 110 FPL points overall, and his ownership is 13.9%. At 5.5 million, he is almost an ideal 8th attacker, and he can produce when you least expect him to. And going into that Southampton game, we didn't actually expect him to start because Danny Welbeck was the preferred choice up front, and because of his injury, that opened the door for João Pedro, and he has definitely taken that opportunity and done extremely well ever since. And Brighton have won 6 consecutive games since that 7-0 loss against Nottingham Forest, so João Pedro has been instrumental in turning things around. He has definitely got that chaotic nature about him, which makes him unpredictable, and you can't really guess when he's going to get those big returns, and he can certainly do that against some of those upcoming opponents. But I would argue that Evanilson is a better purchase for Blank Gameweek 29 with superior fixtures for the next couple of weeks, and I also think Bournemouth are more consistent than Brighton, especially over the course of this campaign. But if you do have the Brazilian, he's certainly worth holding on to, but for those looking to invest new, I would skip João Pedro. West Ham assets might be very useful and also interesting going into Double Game Week 33, and Jarrod Bowen remains my favourite option by far, but I'm not too fond of their defenders, and even Areola in goal, he's just a backup goalkeeper to your main option in Sells, Raya or Pickford. Those are the 3 that I've been recommending all season long. But in the case of Wan-Bissaka, he's got a few decent goals and assists this season and decent numbers in that particular regard, but the underlying stats aren't great, and I just don't think they're sustainable for long-term returns. He has 4 shots on target, 2 goals, 3 assists, and 84 FPL points, which is one more than Nico Williams, who I recommended, but also Nico Williams has started fewer games, and I think Forest have a far better defence, even better fixtures, and Forest are actually top of the FDR until the end of the season. And in the case of Wan-Bissaka, the other stats include 10 shots inside the box, 13 shots overall, an XG figure of 0.91, 2 big chances, 3 big chance created, and 24 key passes. You might also want to consider Creswell, who is so cheap at 3.9 million, and that could be a nice enabler, who features in Blank Gameweek 29 and could have some good fixtures up until double Gameweek 33. But in the case of Wan-Bissaka, he is cheap at 4.5 million, and it's not the worst defender to invest in, but I would argue there are better options in this defensive line, which I've highlighted throughout this podcast. I created the list of players to buy, hold, sell and skip and the 1 week punt before the Sunday matches, and Bruno Fernandes scored a free kick against Arsenal to open the scoring. Rice's positioning was very questionable, the wall didn't do its job, but Bruno Fernandes did his, and it was a good finish by him, and he's also got a very good free kick record. He also scored against Everton not so long ago. That makes it 7 Premier League goals this season, 9 assists and an XGI figure of 13.55, which is very healthy and sustainable. 135 FPL points, and you look at those upcoming fixtures: Nottingham Forest away, Man City at home, Newcastle away, and Wolves at home. I mean, overall, I think those 2 in the green, Leicester and Wolves, look very appealing, and even Man City, I could see Fernandes doing extremely well, but against the likes of Forest and Newcastle, I could see Bruno Fernandes struggling. Then again, Newcastle have their own injury problems to deal with. Sven Botman will miss that game, Lewis Hall is out for the season, so he might be a very enticing option in that time frame, but he's got the ability to get bonus points, he's got the stats and also the underlying numbers, he can score from the midfield and get a lot of bonus points, and he delivered 9 against Arsenal in Gameweek 28, so I think he's a great 1 week punt against Leicester City. He's ideal for the free hit, and for those that can wildcard in Gameweek 30, I'd highly recommend Bruno Fernandes. And that's a wrap for the transfer tips for Gameweek 28, 11 players highlighted to buy, hold, sell and skip with 1 week punt. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and you can see the most transferred out players at this point of the game week on screen. It's worth mentioning that this video is recorded on Sunday evening, so there could be price changes that happen overnight, and that will be reflected in future videos and podcasts. But thank you very much for watching this video and also listening on other social media platforms like Spotify. If you enjoyed it or found insightful, then like the video, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell in the process so you don't miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, Dylan RCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in that description. I wish you all the best of luck for Gameweek 29 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you on Tuesday for a UCL Fantasy deadline stream.